Oh, hey guys. Gonna be an exciting talk. We're gonna talk about my favorite games over the years, and I want to hear what your guys' favorites are after these messages. Today's video has been brought to you by the generous patrons of The Games who make continued content on The Games possible. The Games patrons enjoy monthly giveaways like Steam gift cards, Star Citizen packages, and any game that you want giveaways. Please consider donating just $1 if in any way you enjoyed The Games content. Thank you. Hey guys, welcome back, and I'm just gonna go over like memorable games that stand out to me from the very beginning of time, from a very small child in my underoos to a very large child in my underoos. And don't forget, I want to see what you guys have to say in the comments below. Please like and share, and I want to hear what your guys' favorites are. Not just one game, two games. I want like a list. Like, give me some lists. Let's look over some fun. So let's look at my number one right off the bat that I remember right from the very beginning. Here it is, Asteroids on the Atari 2600, one of my very first consoles. It was like literally my first experience in gaming. And that little triangle, man, it was so much more than that. It was a spaceship. You're bobbing and weaving like in the era of Star Wars, man. You just imagine you were like flying an X-Wing or a Millennium Falcon, and you just like be going around those asteroids like you can't believe. What was your very first game that you remember? I cannot wait to hear what your list is. Mine, Asteroids from the Atari 2600. These different colored asteroids, they were more than just like these colorful different like blobs on the screen. Like you would just imagine like different rocks flying in trying to like bust your ship up, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I remember that transport feature. I forgot all about that. That was like that's a flashback right there. What is my next game that I remember? Also on the Atari. It was this homeboy. He was like a criminal. He was throwing down all these bombs, and you were like, what am I doing? Like, why is this guy throwing down bombs? I didn't know why. Games were really simple. He would go super fast. You'd have this little scrolly wheel, and you go around, you try and catch these bombs, man. This guy was like nuts, man. To try and keep up, there was like this pattern. It's like, I'm even looking at this pattern. I remember this pattern. Like, I'm just like, like picking up all these bombs, and I just never understood why this criminal was like throwing down all these bombs, but I picked them up anyway because I did not want them to hit the bottom. Boom, game over. Game over. This guy's like pro right now. I'm telling you, that was the second game I remember. Third game, believe it or not, Atari again, man. Like the games just like they're just popping in my head. This was like Spider-Man on the Atari 2600. It was very underrated at the time. I loved this game, like crawling up the building, playing against the Hobgoblin. You had to watch out for bombs. It was actually quite sophisticated back in its day. I had a lot of fun on this game. I played it like non-stop. But what was next? What was next? We're moving away from Atari. Now we're going to get into something. Oh my goodness. I don't even know if you guys are going to remember this. It's called Intellivision. Now the Intellivision came out about the same time as the Atari 2600, right? But it was much different than the Atari because it had the pad with the numbers, very similar to Coleco, which we're going to get to. But the Intellivision my friend Doug had, and I would go over his house, and on the Intellivision we would play tennis. He was really into sports games, so I'm going to show you some of those. This is it. I played this non-stop over my friend's Doug house, back and forth with tennis. It was a very, very competitive, fun game. Some of the very first sports game that I remember were on the Intellivision, and it wasn't just tennis, it was also, I believe, baseball. The sports games on the Intellivision were par none some of the best back in the day. Like, I remember having a great time playing baseball, tennis, and many other games on Doug's Intellivision. And it sometimes, like I was telling you, like the Atari 2600 paled in comparison to the actual competitive sports games that were being played on the Intellivision. But this is like the very roots, you know. This is before Madden and all that stuff, which we're going to talk about. But this was what I started on, man. This gives you a little sampling of my gaming history. This game right here, ColecoVision, Popeye, dude. I played ColecoVision Popeye like it was going out of style with all these hearts. You were playing against Brutus. I believe it's Brutus, not Bluto. There's two variations of the bad guy on Popeye. But this was the game, man. And I remember playing this one quite often on the ColecoVision. Now, what is ColecoVision, right? ColecoVision came out in like 1982. There we go. You guys can see it was like early 80s. But to me, the ColecoVision was like an upgraded version of like if the Intellivision and the Atari had like a baby. You know, as far as its order of like chronological when it came out, I believe it was almost a little bit after the Atari 2600 came out. ColecoVision Donkey Kong was the shit. Like, I remember we would go every weekend, my dad and I, he would take me to the arcade and we'd blow like $10 and we'd get tokens. And there was a game, Donkey Kong, one of the very first games featuring Mario, and you know, Mario blew up on Nintendo. We'll get into Nintendo obviously soon here, but this was the first time where I felt like, hey, I might not need to go to the arcade anymore. Arcade always had superior games. Like, the arcade was so much better than the consoles, was better than Intellivision, was better than Atari. And back in the day, like, to get this kind of play, like, you had to go to the arcade. Well, ColecoVision finally brought to your house a version of Donkey Kong that was just as good as the arcade. So ColecoVision all day long with Donkey Kong, man, it was so much fun. It was like a relief. It was like this kind of eye-opener as a child. And I remember playing Donkey Kong thinking to myself, like, wow, maybe video games will get to the point where you don't have to go to an arcade anymore. And then Super Mario Brothers. This was a game that kind of like revolutionized like gaming at your house. When the NES came out, now we're talking Nintendo, the first Nintendo Entertainment System came out. There are so many titles to go over, but I'll go over the ones that like really stood out to me, that really kind of changed my whole stance and made a huge impression. That guy totally messed up that jump, by the way. That's not how you do it. But like, there are a lot of titles on the NES that like really just sucked me into gaming. Like, that is the point when the NES came out where like it became a serious addiction, and I had a lot more fun playing on consoles at home and steered more away from the arcade. Nintendo really killed the idea of arcades. This was the console that really did it. And the titles that I'm about to tell you that really stand out to me, the titles that you're about to see are the titles that killed what we know of or remember, those old enough, as the arcade. Because the arcade died after the Nintendo came out. All right, we all know this. We all know this is one of my favorites of all time, Mega Man. Mega Man employed this really cool feature where when you beat the boss, you got the boss's superpower. What a great concept. And in this 2D scroller gave you depth. For the very first time, it gave you like an idea that the gaming could be so much more, that there could be much more when it comes to like the visual, the aesthetics of the game. Mega Man focused on that. You know, NES really started to bring out like much more in the ways of the artistic design when it came to the actual leveling. The scenes became more rich. The art was fantastic. And just that concept of beating bosses and using their own powers as a way to kind of like beat other bosses was very revolutionary back in the day. And Mega Man was one of those titles that really gave that promise of like, wow, gaming is going to go in the right direction. Dude, many of you old enough remember Kung Fu, dude. Kung Fu was the shit. Kung Fu was like you were Bruce Lee and you were Enter the Dragon and you were just one button was punch, one button was kick. That's all you needed. That's all you needed. And there, you know, there was a lot of different types of things that got in your way, but you just knocked it down. You just knocked it down. Knife thrower, sorry. Club dude, sorry, you're done. There was just like, there was also a magazine at the time called Nintendo Power. It was about 1988. Nintendo Power started to like hit the scene, and it was a magazine dedicated to give gamers tips and advice on gaming. And there really wasn't a lot of kind of literature that was focused on like helping you solve games, and it was very well received. And Nintendo Power was the stuff. Like, you would get a Nintendo Power almost every month, and you would just flip through it, find out what the most recent bugs, glitches, strategies were to solve these games. And Nintendo Power was always what it was about. Like in study hall, you would flip them open, you would just read them from front to back, and you were all about the Nintendo Power. it was such a good idea, and one of the very first instances where you saw like people have that entrepreneurial spirit to say, hey, this is something that's wanted and needed, and we're going to supply it to the masses. So I have very fond memories of even the magazine Nintendo Power, because it was just something different. Like you could lose yourself in it. You know, it was great. It was like gaming. It was like a different form of gaming in itself. When you couldn't play the games, you read about the games, man. And that's what was great. It gave you so many tips. It was a great magazine. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think they're showing Super Mario 3 right there, which we're going to get into another console right after the NES. Let's talk about it right now. Sega hit the scene, yo, and they gave the Sega Genesis a free game with it. One of the very first instances where they were putting free games with consoles. Altered Beast. Sega Genesis was different. Sega approached the gaming world slightly different, and it was like the visual style of the Sega Genesis that was almost like movie-esque. It was like you were in a movie of sorts. I know the graphics aren't looking amazing here, but it was such an upgrade to go to the Sega Genesis from the NES. And it was something that felt different. You know, like when you played Sega Genesis, it didn't have that familiar feel of the consoles that you grew up with. It was a different beast altogether. And I thought that Altered Beast was kind of like a fun play on words, because really it did feel altogether different, but you really fell into like a different style of gaming. And I fell in love with the Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis, let me show you what that looked like. And it was this crazy port, this idea of putting like a CD, one of the first consoles that actually used CDs or DVDs. I think they were CDs. I'm not quite even sure, but that was the main console, right? And then they had like an add-on that you could put onto the Sega Genesis. So they had the cartridges. It was 16-bit. It was a big deal. They had this particular add-on that you can use that was like, you put the console right on there, and then you could start playing games on CD, which like even upgraded it more, which was kind of in the day revolutionary. You're like, wow, I can make the Sega Genesis even better. It was a pretty good idea. It sounded like they had planned for it and were ready for the next upgrade. But the games that you could play on the CD side of the Sega Genesis made you feel like uber elite. Like you were like, oh God, I got the Sega CD now, watch out. And then it was Sonic the Hedgehog. It was Sonic the Hedgehog was the star on the Sega Genesis for a while. There are so many games that I'm not even mentioning, but these are the ones that really stood out to me. These are the games that really kind of Sonic. There's not too many fans of Sonic. I mean, there are, but when I talk to a lot of my peers or people, they're generally not big Sonic fans. And to me, I was a Sonic fan because I like the fact that the screen went by so very fast. It was a different game. Like the game like literally flew past your eyes. It wasn't like any other game. Like the other games kind of had, like, after you got done playing Sonic and you went to another game, you just felt like everything was slow motion. Like you were just like, whoa, like, you know, that's the cool thing about Sonic was like after you had played Sonic for a while, you were like, boom, you were so wired and everything flew past you that when you started playing other games, it just didn't feel right. Like it was like, wow, I should be playing Sonic all the time, drinking lots of pop. You just gotta like always play Sonic. So Sonic had its own feel. It was definitely unique and it was different. And the Sega Genesis, it offered that. And then you became like a lot of the speed runs that you see nowadays are inspired by Sonic. Like people would try and get past a level of Sonic other than, you know, faster than your friends. And then they had these like trippy backgrounds and you'd be playing this and it was just like, you know, you were like in another land and to me, having a great time. You know, this particular level, like these bonus levels were like 3-dimensional and spinning around. There wasn't any other kind of feel like that. But then there was this game in the arcade. The arcade was still kicking, you know, early 90s. I would still hit the arcade and there was this game called Strider. And then when I brought it back home and I found that I could get this title for the Sega Genesis, I was like in love. Strider was one of my very first kind of like anti-hero heroes, swinging around like an improved lightsaber kind of sword that just sliced through the air. Gave me that comic book kind of feel. And I just loved Strider. He had a little grappling hook. You could hang on to things. Strider was the shit, man. Like, that was the game. Like, Strider for me was a very memorable title, and it was just so different. I remember getting this on Christmas and literally playing it till I solved it the very same day and never stopping. There was such a really different kind of feel to this game, like the storyline, and it just had like a very different feel altogether that made the game just, you know, like the grapple hook, which, oh my god, I have to talk about Bionic Commando, shouldn't I? I can't even believe I forgot about Bionic Commando. Maybe you guys will have to look that up another time. Like, I'm telling you, that was another fun game with the grappling hook. Very first use of the grappling hook was Bionic Commando. Can't even believe I forgot that. All right, let's fast forward a little bit here. Let's fast forward. Holy moly, Super Mario 64 on the N64 with that crazy controller, right? This took it to a new level. Like, this was when we got three-dimensional. N64 brought it three-dimensional. It was usually Nintendo that was pushing the boundaries. Like, Nintendo always like kind of sat back and said, bah, surprise. And this Nintendo 64, Super Mario 64, really gave you a new experience. Wow, gaming is going to be revolutionized. Gaming is now three-dimensional. It's getting to the point where you started to feel like it's going to be a short amount of time until I'm wearing like some type of crazy VR headset, which is just now kind of hitting the market. This was the first time you felt like you could put yourself in a game like a three-dimensional game. Now, the N64 titles, here we go. This one gave me many, many months of fun, Super Mario 64. But let's talk about one of my favorite N64 games. Yes, yes, Legend of Zelda. Now, I forgot to mention this on the NES. The Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda, and the golden cartridge was very memorable. I should have talked about that as well. As we talk about this, there are more memories that flood my mind. The golden cartridge, very memorable. But Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time literally blew my mind. It was such a great experience. It was an epic journey. And it was some type of an adventure that will always, always be a part of my particular gaming history. Like, something that I treasure. The time that I spent playing this game was ridiculous. How many times I played this game, the playability of this game, also ridiculous. The feel, the vibe, everything about Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was fantastic. You had that three-dimensional Mario 64, Super Mario 64, N64 feel from that particular game applied much better. The art much better. And right now, like, I'm watching this right now, and it doesn't look like much until boom. Like, now it starts to get serious. Gaming got much more serious with this title. It was just like, I'm enjoying watching this right now to the point where I just want to stop the video to watch the gameplay of this game. Ganon, man, like the Triforce, like the princess, everything was encapsulated into this game to the point where it literally has burned itself into my memory. This particular title for the N64 is one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm not a huge Zelda fan, you know, like, I know that's kind of sacrilegious to say. Like, this title was the title. This, I mean, like, when you talk about Legend of Zelda, like, if anybody were to say, like, if you had to do any Legend of Zelda, what would you do? I would say this is the title. This is the title. That will always be the Legend of Zelda, the way that it should have been done correctly, like capturing the essence of Link, the princess, Ganon. Just it was the perfect quintessential game when it came to this genre, and Legend of Zelda is always going to be this to me. But slightly before the N64 hit, I was starting to get in that PC realm. Like, there's a lot of people now, like, they're wondering, like, dude, you're talking about all consoles, you're the guys, man, you love them PC guys. I know, I do. And the PC bug started to hit initially with this title, Wing Commander. One of the reasons why I really love Star Citizen is I found out that the person who created Wing Commanders is Chris Roberts, is creating Star Citizen, and my very first experience on really falling in love with you know, that sci-fi kind of space sim shooter was Chris Roberts in Wing Commander. Wing Commander had one of the very first kind of gaming experiences, besides, I believe, King's Quest and a couple other titles that I played on the PC initially. God, there's so many games. There are so many games we can talk about here. Look up King's Quest. King's Quest, phenomenal. PC gaming. I should backtrack slightly here from the N64. Maybe need to rewind a little bit. But Wing Commander was one of those games where, like, you could literally pick different, it was like a choose your own adventure book, and you could pick out, like, you know, which way you wanted to go, which gave it tons of playability, which is what they're going to do in Squadron 42. But anyhow, Wing Commander, Privateer, holy God, there's so many titles, guys. There's so many titles. I don't even have the time. Maybe I should make another part. All right, perhaps I will do another part. Like I Doom. There's so many titles, guys. It's getting a little long in the tooth on this. I'm thinking this is going to be part 1. I might make a part 2, but I want to see what you guys put down in the link below, and anything that sparks off any type of ideas that you guys have for any of the games that you played. Anything I talked about, put it down in the comments below. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say. I'm super busy. We're still fighting. Moms is still fighting. Thanks everybody for all the wonderful prayers and the well wishes. We're going to end this particular video here because I only have so much time, but I was glad I could put this together for you guys in the limited amount of time that I have. And it is a very important thing to talk about. Your favorite games, like your favorite, most memorable games that you can remember. So many I forgot, so many that I'm thinking of right now. Doom, like I'm thinking about Doom. Doom was so important. Doom, that's gonna be on the next one. If I do another one of these, oh my God, there's so many, because this is when I started shifting into PC. So maybe I will make a part 2. I'm not quite sure, but I did. I started shifting into PC realm. Like Wing Commander, Doom started shifting me away from consoles. Like I was like, not sure I want consoles anymore. And then I started getting into PC hardcore mid to end of the 90s, and Duke Nukem. There was so many different types of titles that started just sucking me into the PC realm. And people back in those days were like, ew, PC, what are you doing on PC? So superior. Even then. All right, that's it for now. That's it for now. Thanks guys for joining me here today. I can't wait to see what it is that you guys have to say in the comments below. And there's so many asteroids here. Like, are they ever gonna flip the screen? Like, what happened? What exactly happened here, Chris? Is there a bug there? I don't know. All right, guys. See you on the next vid.